Hey guys, it's Jan, also known as Jan Bluster. I have partnered with DXN Provisions, Mass Damper, and Black Fabrica to bring you guys a new build series starting with a Super 2 bumperless and body damper setup. Many of the parts are from DXN Provisions. Mass Damper will be painting and sticker tuning the body, and Black Fabrica accessories were used for this build. Part 2 will show transmission, front and rear bumper, and roller mounting work. Okay, so we're cutting out the parts from the sprue, and we're going to be cleaning the AO620s on the lighter fluid. We're going to be doing the same thing for the rollers as well, for the rear rollers and for the HG rollers later on. But these are going to be for the rear, and the 17mm is going to be for the stabilizer of the front rollers. Now we're just shaking it to make sure that it's removed, the grease, and we're just readjusting the wheels at the front, removing the old AO620s just for fitting from earlier. And we're also removing the old mounts for the MF70. We don't need those anymore for the build. And we're cleaning out some 72mm shafts for the wheels, making sure that they're straight. So we're testing how straight they are right now. Usually one of them is not in good shape. Sometimes you might need to open two packages just for one wheel set, but I've been lucky that one of the shafts has been good for per wheel, so I only needed two packs, basically, one for the front and one for the rear. So now we're adjusting the position of the wheel just to make sure that it's going to be fitting nicely. We're testing how smooth it goes. It spins on its own. We're taking out the spacer over here. We're going to be needing a 1.5mm spacer later on for the for this transmission at the back, right there. It's going to be sandwiched in between the spur gear and the crown gear. Now we're going to be working on the propeller shaft. We need the Super X chassis shaft because it's going to be a little bit longer, and we need the green gears from the 1.4mm normal Super 2 shafts because those are the right gears. You're not allowed to mix the gears, but you can at least use different shafts. There's no rules against switching the shafts around. Okay, so right now we're going to be setting the length of the shaft. So what we need to do, because the Super X shaft is too long, we need to shorten it. Now we're going to be popping in the gears so that they get a little bit further in. So you can see now the gears are a little bit further in the shaft. We're just going to test it and test it up until it fits nicely. Once I'm happy with the length of the shaft, at least the way that it positions, we're going to go and cut off the extra length. We're going to need length extras on both sides of the pinion. The one near the rear gear and then the one near the front gears as well. So as you can see now, that's the front and that's going to be the rear, and we're going to be testing the fit again, see if it fits nicely. Once it fits nicely, we're going to be cutting off the extra tip. We're just adjusting it to make sure it's the right length before we mark it for cutting. There you go. We're going to go mark the length that we need to cut off of the one side of the shafts. Make sure to wear your mask and your eyewear. Protect what you need from your face. Alright, so we're cutting off the tip from there. There you go. So you can see we've already cut off the tip, and now we're just going to make it a little bit smoother so that it doesn't damage the gears when you pop the pinion gears back in. So we're testing the fit right now again. You want it to be tight, but not too tight. If it's too tight, it's going to lose power. If it's too loose, it's also going to lose power. Alright, so we're removing the gears and we're going to be converting into the green gears, but before that we're going to be removing the burrs at the end of the tip just to make sure that it doesn't damage the green gears when you pop that back into the shaft. As you can see, it's a little bit smoother right there. It's fairly uniform now. So we're popping in the green gears and adjusting them to make sure that it fits again, and now we're checking the position. It feels like it's pretty good now. So the next step that we're going to do is we're going to remove the separation wall of the spur gear and the crown gear, because we need to put a 1.5mm spacer right there to hold them both in place together. Alright, so we're doing that now. We're removing the channel in between them. There you go. So you can see there's a little bit more space now. That's just about enough that you need for the 1.5mm spacer. Check the fit again. There you go. There's no intrusion on the propeller shaft, and also where the channel was removed a little bit. There you go. It spins fairly freely. And now we're going to be removing the covers on the gears. The covers tend to just make the gears a little bit slower. They drag a little bit against the inner hub and the outer hub, basically. And here I'm using the Black Fabrica knife to remove all of the covers, just to make it so that all of them are smooth. And I ended up using all 6 of the bearings. The 5th one was a little bit slow, so I ended up replacing one of them with another bearing. Okay, so now we're just checking to see which bearings are quick, not necessarily which ones are going to be good, but just the ones that aren't slow. Because if you're only opening 3 packs, you're kind of hard pressed to find 5 really good ones. As long as there's one that isn't very slow, that one you don't want to use. So luckily I had 5 that are pretty okay, and we're going to be using the easy locking gear cover. It also comes with some crown gear, so you could use some of that too. I prefer the black crown gears because they're just a little bit tougher and they're more easy in terms of maintenance. You don't have to keep replacing them all the time. Alright, so here we're putting in some motor spacers right there. That allows us to control the position of the crown gear on that side. And if I recall correctly, I used 1 on that side only. And then here we're checking the straightness of the crown gear just to make sure it's straight. I ended up actually finding out that when I put this on, the crown gear was actually a little bit off. So I ended up replacing that crown gear that you saw me put in earlier, and then replace it with another one that would spin a little bit more straight. There you go. So you can see that one is pretty straight. So that's one of the things that you guys got to do. Make sure that your gears spin straight. If they don't, you're going to lose power again. So here we're installing the second wheel on the other side. just adjusting it to make sure everything is in a good position where it's tight but not too tight. And here you go, we're spinning the front wheels. As you can see, they're fairly smooth, but right now it's only spinning the crown gear, so there isn't very much friction. So as you can see, it's quite smooth. Okay, now we're going to be working on the rear as well. 3.7 to 1 gear ratios we're going to use. And right there where we put some spacers as well, some motor spacers, and we're going to be using another set of the carbon reinforced crown gears as well. So I think on this side I ended up using 2 of the motor spacers, so you can just get them from stock motors. That's behind the AO620, which is behind the spur gear, and then in between the spur gear and the crown gear is the 1.5mm spacer. Looks like the fit was actually quite good, so we're gonna go ahead and check the fitment, tightening both wheels from one side to the other side. Just want to make sure that when you're tightening it with these pierced wheels, it's just you give it enough space. Basically, you don't want to go too quickly, because if you go too quickly, you risk bending the shaft. So you can see it spins quite well. Not as well as the front, because there's a lot more weight on this one. It's spinning more stuff like the spur, the crown gear, and the 1.5mm spacer as well. Here we're going to test the propeller shaft as well, including the other gears. And it's actually pretty good already. There you go. That's actually quite smooth. Right there. So now we're going to put on the straight shafts. The fluorine coated straight shafts basically. And we're going to need 2 more of those motor spacers as well, just to make sure that the gear doesn't shake out while it's rotating on its axis. Oiled a little bit, and we're oiling some of the gears now. And then we're going to be checking, making sure everything fits again. You know, you gotta adjust a lot, make sure everything's fitting properly. Now we're putting on the terminals. And then the pinion gear right there. So now we're about to check how smooth the transmission of the car is. We're gonna put some brakes on that gear cover so that it pushes down on the motor. That kind of helps the transmission a little bit, make it smoother. There you go, you could hear that it's pretty smooth. You know, that's without braking. So alright, so our next step, we're gonna go and make the rear mount support. And I'm one of the few people that I think does this, but I actually really like doing this specifically for Super 2. What the rear mount support does is that it helps prevent the rear from cracking, and also quite a few other stuff. When it's mounted there, it prevents the rear bumper from twisting out of place. You know, just an additional piece that actually helps keep it in place as well. There you go. So what we're gonna do is use those 2 holes that I was just pointing at right here. Those 2 holes on the outer edges a little bit, that's in the middle. And we're gonna drill through it with a 2mm drill bit. See, now I'm going to point out those two holes again. That hole right there, and then the other hole on the other side opposing it. We're going to be drilling through that with a 2mm drill bit like this. And using the 2mm drill bit makes it easier for you to actually keep the bit straight when you're drilling through it. If you're using something like a 1.8 or a 1.9, you're more likely to wander out of the center. So using the 2 kind of keeps it directly straight. So you can see, there you go. Now that piece has been drilled through, we're going to be showing you what it looks like real quick. There you go. So you can see they're a little bit offset, and it's basically going to lean towards one side of the FRP of the carbon plate over the other, because that's just the nature of the holes. They're just not in the same plane as the other holes on the carbon plate. There you go. Now we're gonna keep that hole, right, the one that we just drilled through, but we're gonna cut off those other holes that we don't need right there as well, that other hole as well, because we just need those 2 inner ones that we just drilled through. Cut it off with the rotary tool. There you go. You want to cut it short and then slowly sand it to the right length that you need. You don't want to cut too much and then have it be not even, so you want to slowly work on cutting off the excess of that cut. Yeah, just making sure that they're both even. You want to go slowly. There you go. I'm checking it to see how square it is on the mat, because the lines help you make sure that your cut is even. There you go. So you can see those 2 holes are now right there. And this piece definitely allows you to keep the back from twisting out of place, because it does get loose over time. You know, the more you race, the more it gets loose. Right, so we're just going to cut off the nub. We don't need that anymore. And then we're going to go ahead and do the angle adjuster for the front bumper as well. And this piece is a mount basically that I got from one of my friends. This used to be a manual mount where you place it and then you run it through a channel with a sandpaper, and with the MF70 it makes it a lot easier. You just mount the piece on the MF70 like this. You got to clean off both the piece and also the mount itself, so that you can use double-sided tape like that to secure the piece onto the mount. And the mount is that angle. It's going to have a 5-degree angle on that position for the number 4. It's kind of a little bit weird. It's not really labeled correctly. So we're going to put double-sided tape on this side, on that side, for where you're going to mount the piece. And the piece is going to sit on top of that. And then what you're going to do is you got to make it flush. Basically make sure it's lined up correctly. Otherwise it's going to be off center when you're cutting it. Right there. So yeah, I was just pushing that plate, that mount onto my work mat so that it makes sure that the double-sided tape is secure on the mount. So now we're using this plate right here for checking, dimension plate, and that helps you align the position of the carbon plate that you're gonna cut. There you go. You want to make sure that it's flush up against the plate so that it's even and flat up against the back wall of that mount. We're going to show you in a little bit to see how much closer it is now, because it needs to be flush up against that side of the plate, up against the upper edge. If you cut from the upper edge, it makes it a lot easier. So as you can see, it's flush up against the upper edge of that angle mount right there. Alright, so we're gonna be using the MF70 to do an angled cut. Basically, if you mount it on the vise is gonna keep that mount straight, but since that upper edge is angled at 5 degrees, it's going to be milling that piece at 5 degrees, as you're gonna see later. Right there, you want to go slow from, you don't want to rush this pass. There you go, the first pass, and now you pass and push the other way just to make it a little bit more efficient. If you really want to go slow, sometimes you actually want to go just from one side. But doing this is okay. I'm going at it from both sides. It's not too terrible. See, there's a lot of buildup of carbon dust. Yeah, always make sure that you wear your mask at this point. Try not to inhale that. It's going to be bad for your health. And then I sweep up a little bit off. I probably should have just vacuumed it at that point. And vacuum it a little bit later. Right, so as you can see, the cut is quite smooth. This is one of the best things about the MF70. You can make your angle adjuster on your own. You don't have to buy it from other people who have the MF70. It's just a good investment. Saves time. There you go. Vacuum out all the carbon dust that's been built up around it, and as you can see, now we have a nicely angled piece of 5-degree angle adjuster. As you can see, it's actually backwards. It shows up backwards because the actual upper edge is now the shallow edge, the one that's further down. The deeper edge. There you go. So we're gonna cut this off. We're going to keep the inner center. That's gonna be placed underneath the roller mount. It's gonna have the rollers for the carbon plate. The other plates that we cut off we're actually going to use as support to sandwich the pieces. So you can see, there you go. And this is a piece for the rear bumper that I forgot to record while I was actually cutting it. And I'm going to do this again. It was already fairly late that night, and I was pretty tired. And as you can see, I was kind of angry at myself for getting to cut those off and just vacuum the rest of that dust out. Now we're going to go ahead and mount this. What we're going to need is 2 sets of spacers specifically for that. 2 sets of 3mm and 2 sets of the 1.5mm. Both of those are going to be underneath the support plate for the back. And then both of those are going to be on top of the rear multi-roller setting stay that we've cut off. There you go. As you can see, it's like that. Now we're removing the front mount plate. We're going to be testing the fit of the angle adjuster as well at the front. 1.5, 5 degree. So initially what I thought I was going to do was use the 1319 1.5mm plate, but ended up deciding against it and ended up using the normal 19mm popsicle, the one that only has a 19mm hole, because of the rounded edge. I feel it's going to be a little bit better for trying to recover, so it doesn't actually bind on the walls too much when it's jumping. As you can see, the front is angled at 5 degrees. The rear is at 0 with that additional support plate at the mounts in the back. Next, we're going to be mounting the 25mm cap screw. The 30mm cap screws we're not going to use up until for the actual rear rollers. So now we're going to be cutting off, or I was gonna show it to you, but I ended up forgetting to do the cuts, so you're gonna see that later. The cuts were done, but I didn't end up filming it correctly. I just forgot to film it. So this is where I was gonna show you where the cut is supposed to go, right there. Cut off the 13mm hole from the side. And there you go. This is the part where I found out again that I forgot what I was doing. I was supposed to film it, but I didn't film it. I just was getting pretty tired at that point. Just forgetting to do some stuff. Pretty angry at myself, but yeah, what can you do? Alright, so now we're going to mount that on the rear multi-roller setting stay. So the first spacer is going to be 3mm spacer underneath the roller plate, and then on top of that you're going to have another 3mm on both sides. So 3mm underneath for both sides, and then 3mm on top for both sides. And that's how you see, that's how the rear roller plate is mounted. So now we're going to do the rear brake. And the rear brake is going to be cut using the actual FRP plate. That's a wide AR rear plate. We're going to be using the dimensions of the wide AR rear plate to be able to cut off those extra pieces of carbon that aren't necessarily needed over there. We just want it to be straighter and a little bit lighter as well too. So plus, if you use it for that dimension without cutting that off, it's going to be way too long and it won't fit into the dimension box. So now, as I'm showing you, that's where you need to cut it off. It's locked in place, and then you cut off that. Basically, that's at an angle. It's not straight, so you want to follow the position of the AR wide plate. It's slightly angled inward as you're pushing the cut through. There you go. Just follow it. You don't want to push up against the plate too much. And same thing for that side. That side is going to be a little bit tricky. You don't want to cut from the top. You want to cut from the middle and then move to the top, because if you cut from the top side, it might bite, and it will. You just want to mitigate that and minimize the amount of bite that will happen. Alright, so we're going to take it apart and we're going to take a look at how uniform the cut is. As you can see, there you go, it's fairly uniform. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be keeping those two holes that I was just pointing at. That's where we're going to mount the rear dampers. So we're going to cut off the 2/19 along that side right there, and that side, and the same thing on the other side as well. Right there, this side, we're going to be cutting off the 19mm holes as well. Right, so just use a tool, rotary tool again. Cut it short up until you can make it uniform. Sometimes this process is going to take a little bit of time because sometimes the weave of the plate itself is going to trick you into thinking that you're cutting straight. Yeah, this took me a little bit of time. I needed to double check every time, make sure that I was cutting straight. You need to have a mat with you that has lines that allows you to actually check and make sure that you're cutting in a uniform way. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm checking how uniform my cut is after every hit on the grinding cutter right there. So now we're going to be countersinking this plate on those holes for the damper mounts and for the mounts for the rear mount or multi-roller setting stay. Alright, so this is a stopper for the countersinking bit. There you go. So you can see I've pulled it up, and then you push it up, and that acts as a stopper basically on how deep you allow yourself to cut the countersink basically. So I can just push down, not have to worry about it. It will leave a mark on the carbon and the FRP, but I'd rather have a uniform countersink rather than a countersink that is a little bit uneven. So having that stopper bit for countersinking is very convenient. And what I'm doing when I'm countersinking is I'm lining up against the hole that's already on the mat. And what that allows you to do is that when you're pressing down the rotary tool, the tip of the countersinking bit actually protrudes through the piece and then goes into the mat and where that hole is sitting. So that prevents you from damaging that mat already, because it's already damaged. So might as well use a hole that's already pre-existing. So all right, so every pass you gotta remove whatever's in that hole on the mat. Just line it up. So just press down. It's pretty good as long as you try and keep it straight. And then once you feel like it's not biting anymore and removing any carbon, it's basically when you want to stop. And here I sand it with the 2000 grit sandpaper, so you could see some of the marking on that stopper, but that's fine for me. I'm okay with that. There you go. We're gonna be mounting some of the countersunk screws. If I recall correctly, we used 25 millimeters on the dampers and 10 millimeters on the mount for the multi-roller setting stay. There you go. The front and then the back. There you go. That's a 10 millimeter screws mounted. And then we're going to go ahead and install the 25 millimeter screws as well. This one you just use normal nuts and spring washers basically to keep it in place. And here we're going to go start fitting the rear underguard for the rear rollers. So they're going to be mounted on those two holes. So there you go. We're just making sure that the fit is going to be fine, so there's no issues with the wheels. So I could just mount it directly onto that spot. And we're just gonna cut it for the clearance of the 19 millimeter rollers as well. So we need to mount the 19 millimeter rollers first. And the spacer configuration is basically the rear rollers, the bottom ones are they use a spacer but not the spacer underneath it. After that, you're going to be on top is going to have a 12 millimeter spacer on both sides and another 6 millimeter spacer on both sides. And you just use the spacers normally, one underneath the 5-spoke rollers and then one on top of the 5-spoke rollers, and then just the steel lock nut on top. There you go. So we're going to go ahead and tighten that, and we're going to check the fit. And then once we've decided the fit, we're going to figure out where to cut and how to cut the rear underguards. So I chose to cut it at an angle, and you'll see it a little bit later to see what it looks like. Right there. You want to cut a little bit short again from where you intend to actually put the cut, and then just grind a little bit more to the position that you actually like the cut to be. So shortly you're gonna see how I've cut it, and then after that we're gonna go and countersink those two holes at the center. So the same thing, line it up against the pre-drilled mat, makes it easier, and then push down. There you go. Same thing on that side. There you go. So now we're gonna go ahead and remove those two screws that's holding up the two plates. And there you go. Fairly easy. As you could see, the plate is nice and uniform, and it's cut at an angle from the rollers. So there you go. It's covering the cap screws because it's really just the cap screws that you don't want to catch on the wall. So now we are gonna go ahead and countersink the front bumper as well. Alright, so the same process, basically line it up, press it down as well. And now I'm using two different holes. There you go. Fairly good. Yeah, I really love this bit. Getting this from Japan was one of the the best things for me. This makes it so much more convenient when you're countersinking. Yeah, it's a lot easier to line all of the holes up. And here I'm sanding it a little bit just to make sure that it's fairly flat and fairly even now. It's still going to leave some marks on the FRP, but like I said from before, I prefer that the countersink is even rather than a wobbly countersink. Alright, so now we're just mounting the front roller mounts as well. Just making sure, and the same thing here, we're countersinking the front roller mounts on one side, and we're gonna go ahead and countersink the other side as well, just so that we could use a countersunk screw. We're gonna be using 30 millimeters at the front. Right there, just press, makes it easy for you to keep it uniform. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and mount the 19 millimeter and 17 millimeter rollers at the front. So alright, so just mount the 19 millimeters, and then we're going to be using another 12 millimeter spacer, a 3 millimeter spacer, and a 1.5 millimeter spacer in between the 17 and the 19 millimeter rollers. And then up top, we use a steel lock nut for now. Later on in the build, I think in the next video, we're probably going to be able to mount the aluminum lock nuts at some point. There you go. Now the build is pretty much finished at this step. You can see the 25 millimeter dampers are mounted, at least the screws. Rear rollers are mounted as well, and the front rollers are mounted as well. So 5 degrees at the front, and then installed with the support, and the transmission is done too. So there you have it. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please like, subscribe, and share. And thanks for watching. Go race.